So my name is Lynette Horning, and I'm a security architect with the security office here at Catapult. I have my Master of Science in Information Assurance from Iowa State University, and I have my CIPP-US as well as my Security Architecture Foundation with SABSA, as well as my 2 practitioners. So I was actually a charter member, so got those quite a few years ago. And prior to joining Catapult, I've spent my security career providing a variety of security architecture, security and data protection solutions and services with a variety of customers and employers that I was fortunate enough to work for prior to joining Catapult. So really happy to be here at Catapult and hoping you enjoy the session. We're going to talk about top 5 data protection tips, how to secure your data. So we'll start off talking a bit about zero trust approach, and then we'll get into identity access management, device and privileged identity management, data governance, data loss protection, information protection policies, and encryption, and application and endpoint security. Is the slide deck working okay? Because it looks to me like this is the one prior to the ones I've been making some changes in.
It's a little scrunched,
Okay.
but it's working.
Okay. So data protection, kind of like starting with any given organization's enterprise architecture, you're going to take a look, of course, at identifying your most important assets, or your most important sensitive. Okay, I don't know what to do about this presentation because it looks kludgy for me, so I'm open to suggestion.
I can try to take control real quick.
Okay.
Let's see if that works. And you can just guide me and say next slide, and I can handle it. Okay. All right. So I'm on slide 5. Can everyone see that?
Okay.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Samantha.
Of course.
Just want this to go well for everyone. Sorry, there's been a few hiccups. So again, in terms of data protection, obviously we're going to, again, take a look at any given organization, understanding what's your most important and sensitive data, and then again, understanding, the large picture with it, as well as, of course, understanding that we're wanting to architect various types of security protections for the various attack surface areas for the data. Also want to be cognizant of responsibly protecting that data throughout the system development lifecycle, and certainly utilizing the various security tools and different policies in your environment to provide a robust security architecture that's going to protect the entity's most important assets. This is going to include the data and the information in that environment. And a robust security posture, of course, includes building in a variety of different security protections and mitigations that are going to protect and defend against various attacks, which, of course, there's no given day where the attackers are taking a break. Certainly, if anything, under COVID, we've just seen certainly an increase in the various types of attacks with some very scary things going on with ransomware. Some really scary things more recently with SolarWinds and some other different high visibility breaches and things that have impacted a lot of entities and a lot of organizations, not just within the United States, but globally. And certainly, of course, we're all kind of grappling, like many things in security and data protection, we're all kind of dealing with a lot of the same issues. So again, just trying to capitalize on different things that we've learned or that we know, and certainly just always trying to stay adaptable and resilient against the various attacks that are going to come our way and the different types of scary tools or different types of attacks out there. And again, like anything in terms of overall security posture, security architecture, data protection, we're going to be needing to continuously monitor and get the different alerts, and Tune are the various tools that we utilize to provide the different data protection in our environments. Next slide, please. So in terms of zero trust approach, and some of you may already be familiar with zero trust, we definitely start at the assumption that there is no trust. We're definitely going to look to, with zero trust, looking at our users, our devices, the data, the applications, and all the different aspects of things or users in our environment that are going to need to be protected. And we're going to try and protect them through multi-factor authentication. Maybe we're going to utilize Windows Hello, which is going to utilize biometric. Maybe we're going to use a PIN. Maybe we're going to use application authentication. Maybe we use a FIDO2 key. There's different types of options for that, but we're going to do that along with we're going to manage our devices. So certainly we want to have the different checks, not only for identity and access management for users, but also for managing the devices in our environment, and also other trust processes, such as maybe it's mobile application management within Tune, different other things, again, that we can utilize in our environment to provide a variety of security tools that are going to, again, support and protect the different data at the various junctures where it's used or stored, or it's transiting as we're sharing it in appropriate ways with trusted entities that are part of our mission business needs. Again, a lot of the different things with data protection fall along the lines of the different practices we see in IT security and security architecture in terms of utilizing least privilege. Certainly we want to foster business enablement, but we want to do it in a secure way. So we're going to want to utilize individual user access based upon what each individual user is going to need to do their job based upon role-based access in the environment. We'll want to enforce access controls at various levels for users, for privileged users, for services, for applications at the various levels of our architecture that is designed to meet the different business needs and protect our data and our business assets. And then we're going to want to have logs of all the activity. So we're going to want to have application logs, logs at other areas within our environment, so we can be using those logs to provide that ongoing monitoring and that threat hunting, and staying abreast of making sure that the activity that we're seeing is expected. If there's anything atypical or anomalous, certainly we would want to be utilizing the different automated tools that we have in our environment, whether it's Sentinel or some other type of security information and event monitoring tool, other types of tools, and other ways that our logs are going to interface with those different tools to be, again, providing that continuous monitoring and detecting on different things, noting if things look like it's a suspected breach so we can dig more granularly into it to determine what's going on. And of course, if it is determined to be a breach, certainly following through with incident response actions and activities. So again, with zero trust, we're looking to really provide a consistent security for all the different endpoints, because our endpoints, of course, are going to need protection from various types of attacks. Next slide, please. With zero trust implementation, we're going to kind of start. One of the starting points would be to identify and classify our data. Certainly there are going to be different types of data, and we want to make sure that we're understanding all the different types in our environment. And this feeds into understanding where mapping the sensitive data flow. So again, we're understanding the different types of data. Do we need to have data masking in place? Do we need to have various types of encryption in place, which we probably do, and thinking through where we're going to get the most investment and return on investment, and where it's appropriate to be making sure we're providing those different types of data protections. The data flow is important because, again, we want to understanding not only from a threat modeling perspective with that, but also we want to understand how to make sure we're safeguarding that data as it's in transit, as it's stored, as it's being utilized. making sure also we're understanding any dependencies or trust modeling that may need to take place. So again, this helps overall in terms of also making sure, again, we're building in the defense in depth and the mitigation protections at the various attack surface areas, and thinking through different places where we want to be cognizant of making sure if we know that, you know, there's some issues with, excuse me, there being some types of attacks, or this being a potential place where it can be impersonated, or it's a possible juncture. Maybe it's an interface with our trusted business partner. Maybe it's also sharing that data, and again, just wanting to make sure that we're understanding those different data flows. Those data flows is oftentimes an opportunity to make sure, as we've been either standing up a new architecture or maintaining one, or maybe rolling out different enhancements or migrations in the environment, that again, we're taking full stock and doing the appropriate analysis, so we're safeguarding the data from different types of potential attacks. Along with this, we'd want to define the security control framework. Maybe, again, given our different entity, maybe we need to be cognizant that we have to be PCI compliant. Maybe we're subject to Sarbanes-Oxley. Maybe we're subject to GLBA. Maybe it's a HIPAA entity. Maybe it's going to be subject to other types of regulatory frameworks such as GDPR, CCPA, depending on where we're located and where the company is having data transfers. Again, we'd want to be cognizant of any regulatory compliance framework that we need to be making sure that we have those protections in place. The data transfer thing, of course, can get really tricky. I know there's been some different changes in terms of that for US with SHREMS too, so that's a little more complicated too. We used to have Privacy Shield, and that's been struck down, so I think they're in the process of trying to figure out what's going to take its place. So again, things are ever changing, not only in terms of the different attacks on the data, on the different cyber attacks, but things are ever evolving in terms of regulatory frameworks and laws. So again, we're going to want to enforce access control for our different users, general users, privileged users certainly, and also, you know, there may be guest users in our environment. Again, just making sure that that is appropriately managed, and we're handling it in terms of identity access management, as well as access controls with devices for managed, unmanaged devices. Maybe we have compliance checks. Again, different access control with regard to our applications to make sure we're managing that at those different boundaries as well. And certainly access control with regard to data, because of course data, once it's in your environment and maybe we're creating it, it's going to be going through various different transits and uses that we're going to use it, whether it's in a front-end database, back-end database, where we're storing it, where we're using it. So are we using it securely through email, and make sure we're having those different mail flow rules, that encryption in place. So just really thinking through all the different ways the data is going to be utilized in our environment, and making sure we have those different access controls at the different levels in place. And again, like a lot of things that we deal with our environment, making sure that we are continuously engaged in monitoring for any potential compromises, any actual compromises, and other signs of attack. Because of course the bad actors, as we well know, they don't take a holiday, and whether it's state-sponsored or other types of bad actors, again, there's a lot of different scary attacks out there. Again, we've seen a lot of spike in the different types of attacks under COVID, as well as a lot of concerns for data protection. You know, certainly we've seen that even with contract tracing. Different citizens have been concerned about not only the security of their very sensitive data, but the privacy of their data, which is why a lot of the different organizations involved in that, you know, architected it and designed it in a certain way to, again, facilitate meeting those different privacy, data protection, and security needs. Next slide. In terms of identity access management, of course, what we're seeing these days as security architecture and businesses continue to evolve with the ways we're using our data is that identity is a frequent target of compromise through sophisticated phishing attacks and other types of attacks aimed at gaining access to various data and information. And the phishing attacks are so scary because they just keep getting more and more crafty in how they are created and utilized, and even for the well-informed security conscious user, it's very tricky to try and stay abreast of these different things. So again, it's not only making sure we're architecting and configuring and designing the different security protections in place in our environment, it's also making sure that from the user perspective, again, we can offer different types of security awareness training to, again, kind of refresh them on different things. Because even though we have a lot of things built in place to certainly safeguard and build that defense in depth, there's still always the need to refresh the user. And we see that with a lot of different things, whether it's sensitive data that perhaps somebody doesn't think there's anything wrong with, maybe send it to a personal email address. And again, depending on what type of different tools we have in the environment to detect that type of thing, is an opportunity to make sure that there is the reaching out to different individuals to refresh them on different awareness of how it's really dangerous to be sending data in certain ways, because there's certainly the responsibility, especially if it's customer data and it's credit card information, it's social security number, it's a variety of sensitive financial data or personal health records or other types of PII, to make sure, in addition to what we've architected as safeguards in the environment to protect that data, that also the user understands their responsibilities to make sure that they're following best practices and doing things that they can do to utilize it or safeguard that data as well. So identity management also is going to include services. It's going to include the different applications that are in our environment. It's also going to include users, and it's also going to include groups. And again, the whole point of using identity and access management is that we're really hoping to help protect the access to the applications and resources in the cloud and also on-prem. Again, with this, we want to make sure that there's no ability, if somebody if an authorized user in an environment is compromised, let's say on-prem, we don't want the bad actor to be impersonating that person and pivoting to the cloud. So again, making sure we're utilizing the various security controls, the configurations, and the different things that we can do to help protect, identify, detect, and just keep things shored up in the environment. Multi-factor authentication and conditional access policies, again, very important in terms of identity access management, and again, providing that layered security protections to data in our environment. And as with anything, again, we need to be engaged in continuously monitoring for any suspicious activity with advanced security reporting. We're going to have various types of auditing in our environment and various types of alerts. And again, of course, with the alerts, trying to utilize different tools and configurations that are going to really help, as those alerts can get really noisy for those that are engaged with reviewing them and doing the threat hunting, making sure we can utilize ways to certainly make it less noisy, make it more meaningful, and certainly be refining that so it's going to be the best we can make it in the environment. And of course, that's going to take ongoing tuning with the different tools as well. Next slide, please. So we also want to think in terms of device and privileged identity management. Again, kind of talked about this earlier, but definitely in addition to identity frequently being a point of attack, also devices. So if there's ways, again, every entity, every organization is going to have to define what's going to make the most sense for their environment and how things should be architected and deployed. But certainly we can utilize managed and unmanaged devices. So we're having those device checks running rather seamlessly. and also so we can have various compliance checks in place. So oftentimes this is going to take the form of AD joined devices. Maybe we are going to have hybrid identity management in the environment. Also, the importance of privileged identity management for administrators with just-in-time access for 365. The just-in-time is really important because it allows those administrators to put on that Superman cape, do what they need to do for whatever the time frame is going to make sense for the entity, so they can be utilizing that access, doing what they need to do, and then certainly check the credentials back in. Because what we don't want to see is that it's permanent access, because that's going to negate the point of having the just-in-time, which is what we can time bounded. So it enables those administrators to do what they need to do. And maybe along with this, again, depends on every individual organization and what's going to make the most sense for their business and their security needs. But maybe they would want a privileged access workstation. So again, another way to enable and protect our privileged users, to enable them to do the sensitive things they need to do in a more protected way. So again, there's usually different ways and different options, and options are always good. And then it's a matter of really thinking through and refining those different options in ways that it's going to make the most sense, protect the data in your environment. Again, utilizing conditional access rules. Those are also pretty important and very useful in these environments that are going to help with device and privilege identity management based upon application, based upon location, based upon group. The other thing, especially in terms of multi-factor authentication and overall security posture, in terms of also thinking through places that are frequently compromised, is to make sure to block the legacy authentication. It's very easy for an organization to think that they've totally configured and enabled the multi-factor authentication, but if we do a stronger analysis, we can see that in some cases we're seeing some of this legacy authentication in place, and that's really dangerous. That's utilized for a lot of different types of attacks. And certainly Microsoft is actually going to take this a step further, and by June of this year they're going to be blocking legacy authentication, just because it is such a serious threat vector for entities. And certainly places have been working to shore this up, but they are going to be deprecating that this June. So that is something that we always want to draw to people's attention, and certainly again, it's complex to make sure you're keeping up on all the different configurations, but it's really important. Again, we've seen a lot of different data breaches have had a variety of different causes and things in place that facilitated that breach to unfortunately take place. And sometimes we're seeing, again, that they've exploited the legacy authentication, and they've utilized it to be continuing to move through and bypass things and do more damage. Next slide, please. So data governance. Data, of course, is going to be subject to a broad landscape of regulations and laws. It's going to be subject to local, it'll be subject to national or international laws. And of course, these laws and the different ways that we're thinking through how to protect the data and different things that are important, a lot of times based upon different lessons learned with different data breaches or different attacks or different things changing in the regulatory landscape. We just want to make sure that we're staying abreast of that. It's going to be subject to different types of compliance regulations, whether it's PCI, maybe it's Sarbanes-Oxley, maybe it's HIPAA, maybe it's GDPR, maybe it's CCPA, or there's a lot of different states in the United States that have been coming up with individual privacy laws, as well as some more recently have been coming up with facial recognition. And some have been taking the facial recognition and the concerns, again, under COVID. There's been a lot of concerns in the contract tracing space with individuals being concerned about their protected health data and having various security and privacy concerns. So again, there's a lot of different things going on in this space. Certainly, if data is breached or there's data loss or data leakage, it can be subject to fines. These fines can be pretty steep, whether it's HIPAA violations, whether it's PCI, whether it's other types of SOX violations, or even GDPR. And again, there's a whole variety landscape of these different things we have to be mindful of. It can also, of course, depending on the severity of the breach, usher in various class action lawsuits. And also it may violate certain business agreements. So again, the data governance, just like the data protection, is really important. And so we always want to make sure we're being very mindful of the different considerations there. Again, ransomware is always very daunting, very scary. And certainly, it hits a lot of the different industries. We've seen it hitting not only healthcare, we've seen hitting the financial sector, even academic institutions, even cities. So again, there's really probably no entity that's really safe. Ransomware payments, though, do require the permission of the FBI. Sometimes that is something that does surprise people. So just kind of wanted to mention that again in terms of the overall approach to data governance. So data loss protection, information protection policies, encryption at various levels, whether it's protecting the data in transit, protecting it with mail flow rules, protecting it as it's at rest, and as it's shared in various places, also as it exists in various parts of our environment, right? Because what it can be at the application level, it can be more at the enterprise level. It can also be in SharePoint, OneDrive. So again, those are all important considerations and a lot of things to be constantly monitoring and ever vigilant on in terms of data governance. Next slide, please. So again, with data loss prevention, our data is and our laws regarding it are constantly evolving. We're constantly seeing new data protection laws with additional nation states. In the US, it tends to be more considered privacy law or data protection. Again, different states have been developing their own. So again, a lot of different things to be cognizant and aware of, and especially thinking through, especially if you're a large organization and you have a different landscape of compliance frameworks to make sure you're staying ever vigilant and understanding how to best make sure you're protecting the data and certainly meeting the different requirements that you're going to need to meet as you're using the data in the different areas geographically and with different entities impacted. In terms of compliance regulations, again, whole variety of landscape. Could be CCPA, could be GDPR, could be HIPAA, could be PCI, could be SOX, Graham-Leach-Bliley, and it is significant fines if the data is breached. So again, data loss prevention, very important. And the ransomware attacks, like I said, along with other kind of attacks have increased under COVID, and it can get really scary with that because, of course, if you're a health entity and people's lives may truly be on the line with a ransomware attack, it's hard. And certainly ransomware attacks are not easy to try and navigate regardless of what your organization is and what type of data you're dealing with. So again, the DLP, the information protection policies, and certainly encryption are going to be important aspects of our overall data governance. And we're going to make sure that we're utilizing the encryption in ways that are going to make sense. Certainly maybe it makes sense to kind of automate it in terms of our mail flow rules so we can make sure that things are scanned as they're coming to their environment. And certainly it's that balancing act of making sure the security is certainly architected to protect the data at the right levels and in the right areas. And also making sure we're protecting it as it's stored and thinking through, as we do use it in transit, all the different potential attack surface areas we need to worry about. And also, again, not forgetting about the human element, again, different types of security awareness training, because these phishing attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. So it is very easy, even for very intelligent, very security conscious employee to be tricked. So these get really tricky and really scary. There's even instances of an attorney knowing that they are responsible for, setting up a legitimate payment of a certain amount for an entity. That attorney maybe gets a very sophisticated phishing email, ends up inadvertently routing that money to a different entity, which unfortunately is not the real one, and then doesn't find out until the entity who's supposed to receive it calls the attorney up and is like, hey, where's the payment? And the attorney's like, hey, I sent it. And they're like, we didn't receive it. So a lot of different aspects of this. And again, we have to remain ever vigilant like we do in a lot of different aspects of IT security. Next slide, please. Data loss prevention, there's a DLP policy template that can be utilized, whether we need to meet PCI, whether we need to meet GLBA, HIPAA, or other types of PII policies. And certainly like a lot of different things that we need to tune in our different environments. Rolling out the DLP policies gradually is going to be the best approach. Certainly if you're let's say you're aiming for like a level 3, and you're starting at level 1, utilize things at level 1 for about 30 days so you have the opportunity to just kind of continue to tune things, and then once things are at a good steady state there, bump up to level 2, again tune it for about 30 days or so, and then you can bump up to level 3. And then of course, once you're at the level 3, it's still going to be the ongoing tuning and continuous monitoring like we have to do with a lot of the different tools and different alerts and different types of threat hunting that we do in our different environments. DLP policies use deep content analysis using keyword matches, using dictionary matches, and other types of content analysis. DLP uses mail flow rules and labeling. Certainly the mail flow rules and the labeling is really important. Again, the labeling to help us understand the sensitivity of the different data. And certainly we can also use this with OneDrive and SharePoint, which again is where some of the different files and different data is. And again, we want to make sure that we're again appropriately understanding how to classify that data, how to utilize rules to label it, and do these different things to safeguard it. Next slide, please. So another important aspect with data protection is application and endpoint security. Again, we're application security in terms of, again, thinking through identity and access management, not only with users, but of course the services, the applications, the devices, the data, mobile device management, endpoint protection, again, making sure that we're being ever vigilant because of course the bad actors always look to exploit various parts of the architecture and various junctures where they try and compromise someone or impersonate them to somehow get at some of our identity. Sometimes they're looking to compromise a user through a phishing attack and then use it to move laterally through the environment. Another important aspect with this, again, the file classification and the different types of encryption, making sure we're thinking through the different sensitive data and where it's going to make the most sense, and making sure that we're not inadvertently forgetting about something at a certain aspect of where the data is or where files are used or where they're stored. Utilizing application and data containerization, and again, always using the continuous monitoring and alerting and tuning. So again, we're being diligent with making sure that we have that application and endpoint security in place. Next slide, please. So in terms of thinking through data protection again, it's going to encompass a variety of different security protections and tools and things we're going to utilize and configure. We also want to, again, always think of defense in depth and different mitigations that we can build in to help protect the identity and the access in the environment and making sure we're effectively managing it. Again, the zero trust approach tends to be utilized by a lot of organizations because, again, it doesn't make that assumption that we can have various trusts. We know with the different types of threats and attacks that we are currently grappling with and will continue to evolve to deal with, utilizing this and understanding that, again, it's important to think about protecting the identity of our users and access in terms of devices and the different applications and the different services and the different ways our data is utilized and shared and stored is really important. We want to think through device and privileged identity management. Again, really important things that sometimes the configurations can get a little tricky in terms of truly making sure that we have all these different security protections in place and that it's ongoing. So again, there's always opportunities to sometimes do an assessments in the environment to make sure that things are truly operating as we would anticipate them, and also making sure that if there are some additional things that we might want to be aware of in our environment, that we're having that opportunity. Again, application and endpoint security. Again, we always have to be engaged in ongoing monitoring, alerts, and tuning of tools. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, data protection is continually evolving as the various cyber threats and attacks continue to adapt. So we always want to make sure, again, that we're adaptable and we're resilient in terms of protecting that data. No one wants to hit the front pages of any given media outlet or have it go viral that there's some horrific data breach. So again, there's a lot of different actions we're continually engaged in. Definitely utilizing the zero trust to keep us adaptable and resilient with our overall security posture. And again, it's not just making sure we have a lot of the different things configured and enabled in our environment, and that we're, utilizing our threat hunting, we're utilizing the different tools to constantly be monitoring different things, as well as user activity, but also offering the different ongoing security awareness to our users, because again, the sophistication of these various attacks, whether it's malware, whether it's phishing, or whether it's other types of attacks, are getting very, very hard to detect. And oftentimes what we're seeing, especially with some recent things, is it's hard to sometimes know when you truly have an attacker in your environment. So it's an ever changing landscape of regulatory compliance regarding security and data protection, and certainly never a dull moment for those of us engaged in the industry and working with the various stakeholders to do the different types of data protection. Are there any questions or comments?
Hi, everyone. I haven't seen any questions come through. Hi, Lynette.
Hi.
So please feel free to raise your hand and chime in and ask any questions as you come up with them, or put them in the chat.
So I see one that looks like an example of ongoing assessments or alerts. So one example would be Sentinel. It's a pretty robust security information event management tool. Also, it has a lot of adaptability to receive and get a lot of different types of logs fed to it. It can interface with Splunk. It can interface with a lot of different things. It's been designed so it can be pretty adaptable to, again, be interfacing with receiving and consuming a variety of different logs. And certainly Sentinel is one tool. There may be certain other tools out there as well, but Sentinel is certainly a really good tool that does provide that ability to definitely do the first pass investigations. It really kind of can certainly assist with those who are having to review the alerts to cut down on that alert fatigue. So certainly that is one tool that I'm aware of. And like I say, it's very adaptable, but certainly there may be other tools that sometimes different customers would choose, or entities would choose to utilize in their environment. And certainly sometimes people choose to use maybe a couple different types of tools because there's different levels at which you're needing that, and maybe for the given architecture in place in your environment, there's reasons why certain tools were selected and they're being utilized in the different ways that are going to provide the most return on investment to any given entity. Good question. Any other questions? Looks like there's a question on advice around driving end user adoption of, what is the rest of the question?
Security processes in the workplace.
Security processes in the workplace. So there's a variety of ways that we can do that. So certainly the security awareness, I've seen that at different places take different forms because, of course, every given organization is going to be different with what is appropriately allowed in accordance with their different policies and things like that. Everybody, of course, is very busy, so sometimes the security and user training takes the form of annual security awareness training that you complete, and that usually also involves different types of privacy or data protection as well. And so sometimes that's rolled out in the terms of, however it makes the most sense in the environment. So users kind of complete that within a certain deadline on their own time. Sometimes I've seen it done where certainly there's certain tabletop exercises done in different environments. Again, depends on the landscape. So there's that opportunity to work through incident response, test exercises, or continuous continuity planning training. Also, sometimes I've seen organizations, again, depends on the environment, where sometimes they'll maybe roll it out with, they'll do like maybe a monthly security tip through email. So again, lots of different ways to slice and dice this, depending on what's used in your environment, different way you can do that. So it looks like there's another good question on phishing. So what are some phishing attack examples you've seen, and how were these resolved? That's a great question. Phishing can get really scary. Again, I think a lot of times in terms of examples, in terms of resolving it, it's, again, just always trying to, in addition to the different tools that we have, certainly there's a lot of good ways to report certain phishing. So I guess I'd say in terms of mail flow rules, certainly enabling it depending on your environment, so the user can, if they look at something and they think it looks suspicious, to go ahead and report it. And then certainly there's that opportunity for it to kind of go through the different machine learning and different also there's going to be a combination probably of automated analysis with it, as well as some different human interaction, because of course these get tricky and we always need sometimes to also have the human engaged to be further refining things. So certainly that's one aspect of it. And a lot of times, of course, with the mail flow rules, it does provide that opportunity to kind of help stop things in their tracks, but also, again, keeping the users ever mindful that they can go ahead if they get something and they're suspicious, to go ahead and report it. And that way we can make sure that we're building the appropriate guardrails in place. So hopefully that helps. In terms of the phishing, I know it is so scary, and again, they just keep getting smarter and smarter, those phishing attacks. So the things that we used to utilize in the past, we can still be mindful, but they aren't always helping us, so we have to be ever evolving with that. So that's a great question. Any other questions? Well, thank you. I really enjoyed doing the session, and hopefully everybody learned that. And I think it's Samantha's turn to go ahead and take over.
Yep. Do y'all see my screen? I'm trying to share here. Maybe not. This is going to give us some issues today.
I can see it.
Oh, good. Okay. So I know it's not in I'm not presentation mode, so sorry about that. But here's that CTA, and Mario actually attached it in the right-hand side if you want to go and follow up. I don't know, Lynette, if you wanted to add on to this this data platform modernization assessment.
I don't, because I'm sure other people have done a fantastic job of addressing how it's got a lot of great value and aspects that can be utilized to do fabulous things.
Perfect. All right. And then also this survey right here, Mario also added that to the right-hand side, but also if you'd like to scan it with your phone, it's going to take you less than a minute to take. So again, just a reminder, if you take this, you're in a drawing for a $75 Amazon gift card. So if you have some things in your cart, this might be the chance that you can go and get all those things. Anything else, Lynette, before I close it out?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and that you're enjoying the Data Culture Summit. I know that I've sat in on some of the other sessions, and they've been really good. So,
thank you so much, Lynette. All right, before we close this thing out, everyone, thanks y'all for joining. This is only day 1 of our sessions. This is going to continue on to day 2, so we hope to see you there. I will be following up with an email with all the links for tomorrow, so please join us. And if you have any questions, my name's Samantha Siebold, and I'll send my email here in the chat. So anything you need from me, please don't hesitate to reach out. Just a few reminders, if you attend 5 or more sessions, maybe you did that today, we'll be sending you a cool little PNG to attach on your LinkedIn or your email signature, just a cool little badge you can brag about all the sessions that you've learned, and then as well as taking those surveys. But all right, I think that's it. Mindy or anybody else have anything else to add?
thank you, Samantha, for all your assistance with the slides today. You're awesome.
Of course, of course. It was a great presentation. All right, we'll see everyone tomorrow. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Good day.
Thank you.